Hi everyone, and welcome to today's TheatreArtLife session on accessibility with the wonderful Lisa Carling, who I'm going to introduce in just a minute. Before we get started, thank you for all joining us. If you have not seen a session with us at TheatreArtLife, on the right there is a little chat box, so you can tell us where you're from, give us a big hello, ask us any questions as we go along. If for any reason you drop out, log back in anytime via the email link. If you can't hear us, log out, log back in again. And a replay will be available to you if your internet is a bit dodgy and you can't connect all the time. So it'll be sent to you after the session within 24 hours. So make sure that you don't miss out. Also, in our effort to be more accessible in the future, we'll be captioning our sessions on our YouTube after they've been done, and we're working on transcripts as I am learning all about accessibility last month. So before we go ahead with that, I'm with somebody who knows far more about accessibility than I do. Lisa Carling is the Director of Accessibility Programs at TDF. And she helps design and implement services that make theatre performances more accessible to people with disabilities on Broadway, off-Broadway, and also nationwide in the USA. She runs a department that provides autism-friendly, open-captioned, audio-described and sign language interpreted performances, as well as seating for theatregoers with mobility disabilities. So, Lisa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anna. I am so happy to be here with all of you. Greetings from New York City. I am Caucasian. I have white hair. I am wearing a bright blue jacket with white flowers on it over a white shirt. I'm looking forward to spring, so I'm trying to look a little spring-like. And my background is a yellow ochre screen. My preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am so excited to be here to talk about accessibility for theater because it is vitally important and it continues to be important.
Absolutely. And I'm so interested to hear about what you've been doing recently. But before we get started with that, I'd like to tell us about what your role is with TDF and how you sort of ended up in the accessibility realm in terms of your career.
Sure. Well, TDF is a not-for-profit organization dedicated to bringing the power of the performing arts to everyone. Part of its mission is to sustain live theater and dance by engaging and encouraging a broad and diverse audience and making theater accessible and affordable to them. The TDF Accessibility Programs Department, which I run, fits perfectly into that mission because we want to make theater accessible to everyone, and that includes people with disabilities. I didn't come naturally into this field. I started off wanting to be an actor and came to New York and anticipated having a great career in acting, but then sort of life happened. And if you're divorced and raising a child and, you know, you do what you need to do sort of to have regular employment. I think that's fair. Probably any actor can understand that. What I found when I started at TDF about 30 years ago was I loved the work. It was a way of merging my love of theater and wanting to share it with people who, quite honestly, had been marginalized for way too long. You know, we think of accessibility services as so natural now. We come to expect them, audiences should, but for many years, people who were hard of hearing or deaf or blind or had low vision or mobility disabilities just didn't have a fair shot at being able to purchase a ticket and go to see a show like anyone else. So I loved my work. I loved creating programs that helped bring people with disabilities to theater. And I love sort of refining and keeping my ears open, figuring out what's new, what's coming down the pike. How can we make these services better and more equitable? So a lot has changed. 85% of TDF's income comes from our ticket sales. And so when COVID hit and theater closed down, Broadway, off-Broadway, we were really stuck. Our organization is going through a rough time, and we adapt, we all adapt. And with digital content, that is part of the process. So Actually, I'm very encouraged. I think a lot of good is going to come out of all of this.
That's
I can
great.
ramble on, Anna.
I know, no, it's fine. So before we get, because we talked a little bit just off air that we were going to talk about a little bit of a history of, where we came from and where we are today. But before we do that, in your words, could you define accessibility? So what is it for people? What makes a show accessible to people?
A fair chance, just like anyone else, to be able to purchase a ticket for whatever date you want to go see a show and go and enjoy it with the supports that you need to make it a similar experience. That's real accessibility to me. I feel it's up to the theater owners and producers to provide that part of audience services. You're welcoming all audiences, including audiences with disabilities. I think something trickier is a social acceptance. I know that it's how do you integrate atypical behavior with typical behavior in an audience, and that's something that I think will be solved down the road. But I think as a society, we also need to be more accepting of people with different abilities sitting with us in an audience. We're all one, we're all part of the same audience, and we're there to share that live experience.
I love that you answered that, not with the technical explanation of accessibility, but more that it was a fair chance for everybody to go to the theatre. I love that definition. Do you hope that in the future that everyone can see a show at any point, not just the shows that you make particularly for accessibility?
Yes, I think that's what we're moving to, and I hope that will happen. Technology will help a lot with that.
Yeah. So in that, let's take a look at the slides that you've given me, which is, I think, a good visual representation of the history. Yeah.
This slide basically gives you a history of accessibility services as they began on Broadway, starting in 1980 through 2020. That's a good 40 years. And just a reminder that the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law July 26, 1990. So you would think we might have progressed a little farther ahead. But anyway, this is where we are. Certainly in the 1980s, sign language interpreting was introduced to Broadway. And I'll back up a little bit. Theaters are responsible for physical accessibility, or they were then physical accessibility. So a theater's architecture would need to take care of ramps, elevators, anything to accommodate people with mobility disabilities. So TDF, as a not-for-profit, our accessibility department, we were providing sign language interpreted performances on Broadway in 1980 for the deaf community, people who rely on sign language as their primary means of communication. And then in 1997, I look at it as the 1990s, open captioning became an option for Broadway because of technology. And that we introduced that by providing a portable LED text display set up to the side of the proscenium facing orchestra right or orchestra left section of the orchestra, and using a live caption operator who would enter a script ahead of time if the show was pre-scripted, or a caption operator who had the ability to do it real time. John Leguizamo's shows would be a perfect example where there's improvisation and give and take. And then in year 2000 to 2010, TDF brought in audio description to Broadway, primarily for school groups, to give kids who are blind or have low vision a chance to attend a Broadway show. It was very special for them. I remember the first show we did was Grease, and because our audio describer was telling the kids through the earpiece how to do the hand jive at the end, they got it perfectly. They were better than any other part of the audience.
Wow.
That was exciting. And then 2010 to 2020, a lot was happening on Broadway. TDF introduced the first ever autism-friendly performance on Broadway, October 2nd, 2011, Disney's The Lion King. And that had national and international impact. It sort of began a wonderful 9 years of more and more autism-friendly performances on Broadway, and our mailing list skyrocketed from 200 organizations in the beginning to 10,000 households, primarily in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, our area, but also we have families that come from, all over the country. Our last show, 16 different states were represented. So that happened in 2011. And then also TDF and the Broadway League partnered on a website called Theater Access NYC. And this is really important, I think, for any city. Where does someone go to find a listing of all the accessible for performances that you can choose from? So that was the purpose of Theater Access NYC. And then because we provide services, our department got flooded with so many requests for open caption performances on Broadway, and our audience members were thrilled. What we didn't realize going on behind the scenes was legal pressure. And maybe you might be aware of what happened with Hamilton, where a gentleman who had vision loss wanted audio described performances of Hamilton. And however that was settled, it was settled. But it was a wake-up call to the Broadway theater industry that they really needed to solve the problem of making all performances accessible with captioning or audio description. The periodically scheduled live services that TDF provides were great, and we're continuing to do those. But what about the ticket buyer who can only come on a particular date, and we're not doing an open caption performance then, or we're not doing an audio described performance then? That ticket buyer, has a right to go when he or she wants to. So Broadway brought in GalaPro, which is an audience services app. It runs off sound cues, voice recognition, light cues, and it means that from any price point, any seat in the theater, you can get on your smartphone audio description or captioning. Broadway rolled that out on June 1st, 2018, and that solved the problem. And in my little image there, Hakuna Matata, everything was solved. And what I neglected to say, and I'm sorry for anyone who is participating who might be blind or low vision, what I have lined up after each decade, or with each decade, are the disability icons. And those are very important. Wheelchair accessibility, sign language interpreting, captioning, open captioning, closed captioning, live audio description, pre-recorded audio description, and autism-friendly, or that's a whole other area of debate. But for us, we use a puzzle piece. But the accessibility icons are really important because they will tell anyone who's looking at performances you're offering what the services are. So I encourage you to use them if you're not. Anyway, that's sort of a 40-year history of how accessibility came into being and where it is now.
So it's only 2 years ago that it became accessible at any point for people to have audio or captioning descriptions. Mm-hmm. So that's amazing. That was. And who developed those apps?
A company based in Israel called GalaPro.
Right.
And, they've done a great job with Broadway. I want to give a shout out to the National Theatre in London because they are doing a super job with captioning glasses. And that's another aspect of technology that is going to go gangbusters. Some people are more comfortable putting on glasses and seeing the captioning than they are reading off their smartphones. So technology is a good thing for accessibility services.
So when the first accessible theatre session for Lion King was developed, did you approach the Lion King, or did the Lion King approach you guys? Or how did that synergy work where you decided, okay, this is the show and we're going to create a sensory-friendly performance?
We brought it up with them, and it's because our department has a very successful student program where we were doing regularly scheduled sign interpreted and captioned performances for school groups, as well as audio described performances for school groups. And one of the things I love about my work is the schmooze time before the house opens, during the setup of lights for the interpreters, or where the caption board's going to go, where the audio describer is going to sit. You get to talk to the production stage manager and house manager and all of that. And, you know, we're hearing from teachers, special ed teachers, it's great that you're doing this for our students with hearing and vision loss, but what can you do for all our classes, kids on the autism spectrum or with other developmental or cognitive disabilities? And the production stage manager for The Lion King, Ron Vodka, love that guy. You know, maybe Disney would be interested in this. Let's try to do it. Let's try to accommodate students on the autism spectrum. So we approached Disney. They were totally open to the idea, and we had several meetings with them. We met with parents, special educators. We found out what would work best, and we decided that a designated performance would be the best way to do that. And it means a performance that's off sale to the general public, because mixing atypical behavior with typical behavior is not going to help either audience group. And we felt that with autism-friendly performances, it was more than just providing students a chance, it was bringing the whole family in. Because if any of you have friends or family members on the spectrum or with other developmental disabilities, you know that there's not that much you can all do together. So that's why we began with the idea of a designated performance off sale to the general public. TDF is the only point of purchase for tickets. And we also negotiate with producers the best buyout price for buying all those tickets. Because if you are raising a child with special needs or an adult, or the expenses are enormous. And we wanted to make sure that it could be as affordable a ticket as possible and the whole family could come. Typically, our groups are 4 or more. You have the parents, the siblings, grandparents, aunts, you know, we want to make it a family experience. So that was a long answer as to how The Lion King came into being, but Broadway has been wonderful to work with. We've done, I think it's 18 different productions over 9 years, and total of maybe 40 performances in all, because the very popular ones like The Lion King, Frozen, Aladdin, Wicked, we've done many times, repeated them over the years.
And in summary, when you sort of go to the production to make it sensory friendly, you as a team going to watch the normal production and then looking at what kind of modifications you make, or is that a discussion? How does that work?
It works. We send consultants in. We typically use 3 consultants. 2 are board certified behavior analysts who are professionals in the autism field. They work with children and young adults on the spectrum. And our 3rd consultant is on the autism spectrum. He's now in college. I can't believe that, Harry. But they will go and take a look at a production, come up with suggested modifications, and then we take those suggested modifications to the artistic and production team and say, what can you do? How workable is this? Most of the time, the slight adjustments are easy to make. They are typically going to be eliminating strobes or any lights that pan out into the audience, or lessening them or slowing them down, keeping the sound levels at 90 decibels, and keeping the house lights up at about 30%. Occasionally, there are going to be production modifications. I like to cite Cats, where we asked the actors not to touch, crawl over the audience members. But we are very respectful when we go to shows with these suggested modifications, because we want to keep it the same great performance that typical audiences are seeing. We don't want to interfere with the integrity of the production. And another aspect of that is that we are not bearing the financial cost of any adjustments made during rehearsals. I know with The Lion King, what they did was they used a put-in rehearsal for young Nala to make adjustments. An easy one to understand is when Mufasa falls from the cliff, there's typically a strobe light on him as he's falling. And what the production team did was they just took it to a very dim light so you could see Mufasa falling, but it wasn't as jarring as the strobe light. That was an easy adjustment to make, again, during a put-in rehearsal. But we have been spared knowing the extent of the cost of any special rehearsals. All I can say is that the Broadway theater industry has just been so supportive and great in welcoming an atypical audience. Couldn't do it without them.
And what about, does TDF sort of look into people who work in the industry in terms of theatre backstage or on stage, supporting that, or mainly stays within the audience realm?
We're mainly the audience. We do this for the audience, cultivating the audience. SpongeBob SquarePants is one of my favorite shows that we did. And I know the production stage manager had a son who was on the spectrum. And he was at the theater with her during our performance. And she said, can he help? Can he help with your volunteers? And we said, sure. So that we readily accepted him. With our volunteer pool, we do have several self-advocates, volunteers who are on the spectrum. We include them. It's wonderful for the community to see that they are part of our volunteer group.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
No, that's amazing. So tell us, I'm going to open the volunteer presentation thing, because I think this is a good explanation of how you prepare people who volunteer to help with accessible shows, right? So do you want to talk us through this little presentation?
I will. We ask a theater manager, house manager, how many people are on your house staff? And sometimes for Broadway house, ushers, ticket takers, merchandise people, sometimes it's going to be 30 people, 40 people. So that's about the group of volunteers we bring in. Our volunteers are, I would say, about a third professionals in the autism field, and the rest have hands-on experience with autism because they are a parent or a sibling. So we always survey after every audience, and our volunteers get wonderful, feedback from our audience. They are there to help the audience. So we put on a big breakfast for them the morning of the performance. Typically we do weekend matinees. We do an orientation for them, slide performance. So here we are, slide presentation. So that's our opening slide. And while that's there, I have our consultants introduce themselves, our board certified behavior analysts say a few words, and then Harry, who's on the spectrum, greets the volunteers and talks about his experience going to a show and how he's helped and what is challenging for him. Typically it's speakers. He doesn't want to sit near speakers, and just giving them an understanding of the audience they're going to be welcoming soon that afternoon. So let's see. Okay, this slide, purpose, and we always emphasize this, it's a family experience. We're so invested in that. And this is a collage of about 6 different photos. And family in the broadest sense of the term. In the upper left, you see a family from a residential home, young adults. Center and lower right, you see single parent families, a mom with her son, a dad with his son. And then upper right, it's a family there in the Gershwin Theater where Wicked's playing with. They have a photo booth and you can dress up in all kinds of fun Wicked costumes. They're having a picture taken. And I can usually go by a lower left. That is, I believe, in the New Amsterdam Theater. It's funny how you remember the lobbies and backstage areas of all the theaters. Our audiences are diverse as can be. Autism goes across the board. So we welcome them all. We welcome these families. We want to give them families affected by autism or with other developmental or cognitive disabilities or sensory sensitivities, the chance to come together and have a shared experience and make memories. It's for them, it's for the families. We focus on them. So we remind our volunteers of that. And then we go over the show modifications. It's what I mentioned already, an example of toning down strobe lights. You see Elsa from Frozen in the upper right, toning down those strobes. And in the lower right, the Cave of Wonders from Aladdin, capping the sound levels there at 90 decibels. At the New Amsterdam Theater, Aladdin on Broadway, they had huge speaker stacks at the back of the stage for the Cave of Wonder and huge speaker stacks right by the proscenium, the front. So they eliminated the sound coming from the front of the stage, and that helped. And then lower left, you see the wonderful Circle of Life procession from The Lion King, which gives me goosebumps, puts tears in my eyes every time. TDF has advisory partnerships with other theaters around the country. We will help regional theaters do their own autism sensory friendly relaxed programming, as well as open captioning. But The Lion King, I've seen, it doesn't matter where I am, Smith Center in Las Vegas, and then Seattle, in Washington State. Every time the Circle of Life procession, autism sensory friendly programs, boom, like water faucet. It's because I think the accessibility continues. It's wonderful to see theaters in other parts of the country taking that show and other shows and making them accessible to families affected by autism or with other developmental disabilities. Okay, oh, that was a lot on that slide.
Oh, good, good.
Okay, we go over the preparatory material. Our volunteers have bags and they will be handing out character guides that you see on the left for The Lion King. It's important with a production like The Lion King to show the animated character, Simba, Mufasa, and the stage character, because often you have literal thinkers in the autism community, and we want to make sure that they are prepared for seeing the live Mufasa and the live Simba on stage. And then on the right, you're seeing a social narrative, which we still post on our website in a Word document so that parents can adapt it, personalize it for their child or adult, whomever they're bringing. An example would be, if I feel frightened, I can hold my whatever. Or if I need a snack, I can have, with Harry, it's green grapes. Harry needs green grapes at a show. But again, making the experience as personal, as welcoming as possible. So our social narratives are adaptable. Okay, what's next? Oh, we have Becca, our lead autism specialist, go through a brief reminder of what autism is. And Becca worked hard on what she wrote, because Harry's there and he does have autism, but we feel this is a very fair description of it. A diagnosis that describes a variety of characteristics and may include challenges in the area of social interaction, verbal and nonverbal language, and repetitive motor movements. Okay, that's good. Good slide. We remind our volunteers of what they may hear, and we also do this in our cast and house staff trainings. On the right is a picture of an adorable little boy at SpongeBob SquarePants, and I can tell because the fidgets we ordered for the show were pineapples. So he's giving that pineapple a good squeeze. We remind our volunteers that they might hear clapping and laughing in unexpected places, vocalizing in unexpected places, and repeating back words. I loved it when we did Matilda, how we had some really vocal people in the audience who were answering, questions she was bringing up. That's an example of how, certainly in a cast training, actors need to know that. So anyway, next slide. Please, Anna, you're doing a great job. Okay, what you may see, we remind our volunteers that they might see motion, the flapping, pacing, rocking, communication devices such as an iPad. And on the right, you're looking at a young girl with headphones, and she has her communication device with her, and she's talking to one of our volunteers who's handing out koosh balls, stress relieving objects that I love. I have so many on my desk at the office. We remind them that audience members on the spectrum might speak prolifically on one topic. And I'll always remember a conversation I had with a young man at the back of the New Amsterdam Theater for Aladdin before it started. He was telling me all about his watch collection. He knew so much about watches, and actually he made me very interested in watches. So anyway, be prepared for that. And then just a reminder about lack of eye contact does not mean that someone is not listening to you. Sometimes there's so much in terms of sensory input going on that someone on the spectrum just needs to look away, just take in what you're hearing. We remind volunteers of that. That's good. That was good for that slide. We encourage our volunteers that they are sort of our first line of defense. We rely on their support. They're there to greet audience members on the sidewalk as they're coming in, and they're in the theater to help make them feel comfortable. So this is a collage of 4 photos. And in the upper left, 3 of our volunteers outside of the Gershwin Theater for Wicked. I think we chose the green. They're wearing hats because it's cold. Typically, we do Wicked on Super Bowl Sunday in February in New York. So they have their bags to welcome audience members and to hand out the koosh balls. And then in the upper right and lower left, upper right is also the Gershwin Theater. I can tell from the posters. Our volunteers sit there and they will talk to any kids who just don't want to sit in their seats in the theater just yet. And there are things for them to do, coloring books, just engaging, whatever they want to do. And then sometimes the merchandise at each theater, lower left, they will give us dolls. I can see lower left 2 of our volunteers sitting on a rubber mat. We set up rubber mats in break areas in the lobby. They have Aladdin and a princess doll there. And then lower right, a volunteer handing out koosh balls again to a little girl. I think with the green hat, it's likely Wicked again outside the Gershwin Theater. Okay, thanks. Okay, helpful tips. And this is important. Follow the lead of the parent or the caregiver. You don't know the child, you don't know the adult. So there's no need for our volunteers to sort of step in and assume. A tough call, for instance, Minskoff lobby. What do you do if a kid is running towards the escalator? Hopefully the parent or caregiver will catch him, but if not, then volunteer needs to step in. But always take your cue first from the parent or caregiver. Only engage in situations you are comfortable with. We remind our volunteers of that. No need to initiate physical contact. You don't need to hug kids unless they are hugging you. Things that have come up that are awkward. Sometimes a parent will say, "Can you watch my child while I go down and get something to drink at the concession stand?" And no, that's not the job of the volunteer. "Can you assist with toilet transfers?" No, not the job. We want to make sure our volunteers feel comfortable in saying, that's not really something I can do. We encourage our volunteers to include the whole family. You maybe heard the term about a second parent, but very often a sibling just feels like a parent too if she has a brother on the autism spectrum. So we want the whole family to feel included. And that means giving out koosh balls to everyone in the family, by the way, because we all love fidgets. We tell our volunteers to watch the audience, not the show. This is what makes for a good volunteer. You don't want volunteers that are just there to, free opportunity to watch The Lion King. No, they are there to watch the audience, to be there for them, to help them, to direct them to wherever they need to go. We encourage our volunteers to connect with the ushers because they are there to help the ushers as well, and to look happy. All right. No, this is a joyous event to celebrate. And in the lower left, we have a picture of a very exuberant young man with his hands up. He's holding another one of our stress relievers, a star. and he's outside the Harry Potter theater, the Lyric. Anyway, he's having a great time already. Okay, that was good. Next slide. And these we can slip through, but it gives you an idea of you have to place your volunteers and do it day of, so they can write down, they can see, am I a crowd facilitator? Am I going to be in the second level lobby? Am I outside the mezzanine area? So you give them places to be, your volunteers. Cheat sheets are a great thing to have. All of our volunteers wear name tags, and the cheat sheets are small and they can fit right in their name tags. And on one side of the cheat sheet, what this slide shows, left side, the Lion King, name of the production, and the address. And then on the right side, important information such as where are the family restrooms. Just a side note on that, make all of your restrooms family restrooms. And then break areas, where can they go if their kid or adult needs to take a break, and concessions, merchandise, where are the wheelchair accessible entrances, all the main questions that volunteers might be asked. Okay, that's good. Theater logistics, a lot of text on this slide, but we want our volunteers to feel comfortable, so we tell them where they can store their personal belongings, such as their purses. Typically, it's usually behind a bar area in the lobby. We have our volunteers with professional experience wear colored stickers on their name tags. We need a certain number of people in the theater, volunteers, who can make a judgment call in case of an emergency. We haven't often had this happen, but it can. So we want to know who the volunteers are who have some professional expertise like that. One volunteer in an area has headphones that we give out. We also have the volunteers give out earplugs that you can stick in your ears if needed, but we also have heavy-duty headphones if needed. We ask that the volunteers stay in their assigned areas. You want to have volunteers you can depend on that are not going to wander around. And then we bring supplies into a theater. We have to rely on some of the volunteers to unpack them and then pack them up, usually about 30 minutes before the show ends for storage, and then we take the supplies away. These are, like a rubber mats and things. And then we do a wrap up with the volunteers at the end of the show. Always appreciate your volunteers. Okay.
Absolutely.
Give them important phone numbers, troubleshooting.
Sorry.
That's fine.
Don't want to spread out.
Troubleshooting, volunteer questions, a TDF staff member, autism related, a specialist, ticketing administrative, TDF, we will handle the ticketing, medical emergencies, report to an usher, and cell phones only to report a situation. No taking selfies, no, you're there as a volunteer to help the audience, and you can have a lot of fun afterwards after the show is over, but we need to remind them of that. And then, as I said before, appreciate them like crazy because they are so wonderful. This picture was taken outside of the Palace Theater, SpongeBob SquarePants, and I remember standing on a cement block, going out into Broadway, getting all of our volunteers in the shot. But they were having a wonderful time. It's so rewarding. It's great for the families, but also wonderful for the volunteers. We love them. They're just very essential. And then we open up our volunteer orientation for questions. So. Anyway, and amazing. If you have a handle, anything social media, get it out there. So
yeah, that's amazing. So I think that in summary, I mean, you work with a lot of volunteers, so it must be a mammoth effort to coordinate an accessory friendly performance. You've got the volunteer aspect, and I think that's a great insight into what you have to show them and what you have to prepare within a periphery environment for people to, not just what happens on stage, but what has to happen around the theatre.
Yes.
Yeah. And so if somebody was, or if a theatre company or an entity was looking to make accessible performances in their location? I mean, what would you advise them to be the first steps into beginning that? Does it cost money? Does it, who do you get on board? How does that work?
For an autism or sensory friendly or relaxed performance, or captioning.
Well, I think the reason, yes, we could ask where do you get those resources for captioning and stuff as well. But start with accessory friendly performances and sensory friendly.
And just to rely on your community, what term is going to resonate with them, because TDF uses autism friendly. It's because we live in an area where there's a very high rate of autism diagnosis. The CDC is saying 1 in 54 now. In New Jersey, it's 1 in 32. And when we first began our program, we had a meeting with producers and general managers in the Broadway theater industry who were parents of children on the autism spectrum. And what term? And they all said, autism friendly, put it out there, use it, raise awareness. So that's what we use. And 80% of
I think it can vary from country to country what the terminology is.
UK relaxed performance works beautifully. I think more regional theaters around the country use sensory friendly. But again, what's going to serve your audience the best? And whatever term you use, describe it clearly on your website. So ticket buyers know what they're getting in for. So, all right. A sensory, relaxed performance, autism friendly. Where do you begin? Just jump in and start. Make it a welcoming, judgment-free environment. Know that audience is welcome. Look at the production you want to do. Have some people with a professional eye take a look at it and see if there are any production elements that need adjusting. Cover yourself in that regard. It's not just what, so-and-so thinks. No, make sure it's someone who works with people on the spectrum or with other developmental disabilities who can say, I don't think it's a good idea to have confetti fall on the audience. That's a big one. Confetti, no confetti, confetti, no. We do confetti, but if you run into a parent who says, I didn't like the confetti falling on, say, well, we consulted with our professionals and they felt it was okay. So have a professional eye look at the production and then see what modifications you can make. And keep in mind, what you're going to be looking at is the house lights up at about 30%. That's pretty easy. Sound, capping at 90 decibels, again, fairly easy. I'm not a sound technician. I don't have to sit there at a board and mark cues. So I apologize for that for anyone who is, in sound. And lighting, the same thing with slowing down strobe lights or dimming lights. Those are specific cues in shows. And I know that from sitting through a long tech rehearsal for The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which has so many sound and light cues that were beautifully adjusted for our autism sensory friendly performance. So to a theater production, what can you do? What makes sense to do? What can you do? And be reasonable about it. And if there are things you cannot do, let your audience know ahead of time. An example I cite is in Spider-Man, and we did that on Broadway. You have Spider-Man and Green Goblin for their aerial fight. They're lit by spotlights. And right. For safety reasons, you cannot eliminate those. So you keep them in. It also preserves the integrity of the production, but you warn your audience ahead of time. So if a parent has a child and that parent knows my child will be upset by seeing these circling spotlights around the theater, maybe it's not the show for them, or maybe that's a scene that they will miss because they're in the lobby, maybe taking a break. Who knows? Resource material is very helpful. Character guides are the most popular we've found, but the social narrative helps, where you give people and audience members an idea of who the main characters are. And a character guide is great if it can also slip into your playbill. That's a little tip. That's good.
And so just to, sorry to interrupt you, in that sense, if you go through those processes and, go through those steps of, okay, what can I do on stage? How can I get my volunteers to help around? I've got a professional in to make an assessment on what might be the appropriate adjustments. Can a theatre then just go for it? I mean, there's no kind of like, it's you don't want to create an environment that is uncomfortable, but you want to be confident that you can do this. So like, where's that line? Do your research, make the adjustments, be overcautious to begin with. I mean, in that case,
do your research and do it. Just jump in and do it. Don't hold back because you're afraid to do it. Just do it, and audiences will appreciate that. Everyone understands it's a first time. This is programming that we hope to continue. This is our first attempt. Survey your audience, give them a chance to let you know, have feedback. I mean, make as many judgment calls on your part as you can in terms of where you can have break areas in the lobby, what production modifications you can make, what elements in the production might be disturbing, gunshots, warnings about that. Going back to Curious Incident, starting off with a dog with a pitchfork in him, in front of the stage, warning on audience, it's not a real dog. Just do the best you can, as you said, Anna, your research, good faith effort, and then you learn and you get it better and better and better the more feedback you hear from audiences, because this is a neglected audience, and knowing they are welcome means the world. I remember a father at the Lion King who said this should be called a judgment-free zone, because he and his wife were so used to explaining why their daughter would be vocalizing, and their daughter must have been in her 20s. Don't have to do that. Everyone relaxes. Everyone has a good time. Shoulders dropped. All good.
Yeah, relaxed. Irene asks, is it better for character guides to be created by the production or the house admin staff? Who usually does that in the Broadway sets?
The character guide and
the little sheets.
We do it in-house, and then we run it past our autism specialist.
Right. So I guess it's whoever in a local production. It's whoever's available and whoever's printing the program, I guess. Right? Yes.
Multitasking, isn't that the truth? Any of us who grew up in theater, boy, do we multitask.
And my other question too, so my fear is, and maybe I'm mistaken and you can correct me if I'm wrong, with other forms of accessibility, be it audio description or captions or anything, when I think about that in very limited small budgets and theatres, like how do we accommodate that? Because really it's going to come down, how much does it cost to do that? And, how much is the benefit outweighs the cost that we put into it? Unfortunately, that's a lot of the thing, that if you as an individual, or me as somebody's trying to be an advocate for accessibility in the arts as a stage manager or whatever, how do I go to argue for those certain things?
Prioritize do-it-yourself captioning, drop-down screen, slide titles.
The app that you described, is that a costly application to
It
get?
Is. It is.
Yeah.
But hopefully the cost will come down.
Right.
Hopefully what the UK is doing, National Theatre, with eye captioning, hopefully the cost of the captioning glasses will come down. Good faith effort, policy on your website, have a point person for accessibility services, what someone needs, and a reasonable time frame to try and accommodate if nothing is happening. If you have someone coming who needs captioning or who needs sign language interpreting, advance notice, 2 weeks.
And perhaps they could engage with any kind of accessible institution in their city, right? So if there's a centre for autism, or if there's a learning thing, then perhaps people who are engaged in that. It's always for me, as a person who makes shows, it's always about the practical. Okay, so I know what to do, but how do I make the roadmap to make that happen? So that's always the challenge.
What we don't see coming down the line in terms of technology is how do you accommodate a sensory-friendly performance, autism-friendly, relaxed performance how does that person, that family member, that have a crack at going to any performance they want to? And I guess there you rely on your wonderful theater manager, house manager, and ushers in terms of accommodating so everyone is comfortable, relocating seats, doing what you can, a reasonable place in the theater lobby to take a break. Just being accommodating, accepting, and welcoming. What do you need as an audience member to make you comfortable, to make your experience a good one? And how can we make that happen?
And so what for the future, Lisa? We talked a little bit about technology. Do you think that these things are going to become cheaper, faster, and easier and more accessible in the future? Because even that trajectory that you have, the timeline, there's been a lot added in the last few years, right?
I hope so. Interestingly enough, as COVID shut us down for live in performance, we have this sudden interest in making digital content more accessible. What I think is going to happen is when theaters reopen is you'll see we will keep part of the digital theater experience going, and as more and more people become ready to go back to in-person theater. And it's wonderful that digital content is doing the captioning, doing the audio description, figuring out ways to get the sign interpreting in. As I say, it's to be solved in terms of making performances open to people with autism or developmental disabilities on a regular basis. We still want it to be a welcoming, judgment-free environment. Maybe we need to change as a society. I don't know, but when we're dealing with it's very expensive theater tickets. I know.
So you have a video here. So you want to tell? Let's play this, and we can show.
I do. There's a wonderful magician, Kevin Spencer, and the first event we offered to our autism sensory friendly audience members was the magic of Kevin Spencer, and he was able to replace what we miss, which is the in-person contact, with giving our audience a sense of connecting with them digitally by teaching them magic tricks. And Kevin needed at least about 25 people that he could see on the screen. And if you watch this is a clip of highlights from Kevin's show, but he knows the people by name, and he was so great at teaching them magic tricks. And there was one boy there stimming, and I thought, how is he going to do this trick with the dollar bill and the coin? And he did it. I have no idea how he did it, but that was an indication of Kevin's magic. But anyway, it's a short clip, and it's fun to watch him. Great to see the audience too.
Let's take a look.
Okay, that's witchcraft.
This is the Ace of Diamonds. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is.
Hey, I just got it too. Yeah. Oh yeah. I did it.
You guys did such a great
great job. Give yourselves a hand. Good job. Did you have fun today?
Yeah.
I did too.
Yeah, we did. I had fun.
That was super cute.
Thanks for sharing. I've got to practice those magic tricks. I learned 3 of them.
Oh my goodness, I want to learn. I want to know them. Irene has a great question in terms of saying, what methods do you offer or suggest? So you've gone out and you've done your sensory friendly performance and you've had a go. How do you get the feedback from the attendees and parents to see if what you've done has been worthwhile and good and appropriate for them?
We send out electronic surveys right after each performance. That's how we get our feedback from our audience. We sell our tickets online, so we've got their email addresses, and we really rely on getting feedback about how useful the resource material is, the break areas, and suggestions, what could we make better, and also what they want to see in the future. Timing of the shows. A tip, 99% of our audience members want weekend matinees. So in order to set yourself up for success, I would try to schedule a sensory-friendly performance for a weekend matinee.
Right. Good tip. Lisa, thank you so much for spending an hour with us at TheatreArtLife and sharing your experience on autism-friendly performances and accessibility generally. I really appreciate that.
Went by fast. I've loved it. Thank you, Anna.
No, wonderful. And for those who are still with us, I just want you to show you some of the stuff that we've got coming up in terms of webinars. Wednesday my time, which is tomorrow, maybe around the other part of the world. I get lost in time zones. We've got Eric Hernandez, who runs the Cirque Life YouTube channel and how he's pivoted during the pandemic after working as a circus performer. Next week, January 25th, we are having a discussion with actor Sam Humphrey, who is one of the people with disabilities who is a performer and was in The Greatest Showman. If you have seen that show, looking forward to chatting with him to hear about his challenges. And we've got a free masterclass, A Brief History of Makeup and Hair, which is coming on January 26th. And I hope you'll really join us for that as well. We've got a wonderful person who does hair and makeup. And if you'd like to support us here at TheatreArtLife, we've begun a donation page. So if you'd like to continue to enjoy our free webinar, podcast, and social content, love to have you make a donation if you are happy to do so and you're enjoying our content. So thank you so much for that. Lisa, thank you again. I wish you the best for 2021 and hopefully we can see some Broadway on stage plus some accessible Broadway shows this year in 2021.
Sounds great. Thank you, Anna. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And thanks everyone for joining us.
Okay.
Bye.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And thanks everyone for joining us.
Okay.
Bye.